Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We are in 1 Timothy chapter 6. We'll be starting verse 9 this lesson. But before we begin, our theme verse for Lunch with the Lord, Jeremiah 15 verse 16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them. And thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, as we begin verse 9, it says here, But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. This Greek word for will is boulomai. And boulomai is a strong word meaning a desire that comes from the mind or from the will or from our reasoning part of our mind. And it means to deliberately exercise the will towards something. So here you have in contrast verses 6, 7, and 8 deal with being content with the things that we have and being happy that these things come from the hand of God. The food that we eat, the clothes that we wear, these things are coming to us from the hand of God, and we are to be Christ sufficient, contentment. And we trust God and we have faith in God. But now, in verse 9 and 10, Paul's going to deal with people who have a will, a desire to be rich. Now, so rich people, the rich people that Paul is referring to they've planned it in their mind that they want to attain riches. Now, it doesn't mean that they will, but it means that they desire the riches. So, when it says here, but they that will be rich, does not mean he's talking about only the rich people. He's talking about people who have a desire to be rich. They can desire it, but they may never get it. You got every one of us in our life, we've always imagined what would it be like to be rich, either by starting a business or by hitting the lottery or whatever. But we imagine in our mind, what would it be like if I had $5 million, right? Or $25 million? What would I do? And we imagine in our minds. So everybody does that. But it's not talking about those kinds of people who imagine being rich and what it would be like. But this verse is talking about those who actually will, in their mind, they've determined, I'm going to go out and I'm going to make lots of money and become rich. And again, it doesn't mean that they actually attain the riches. It just means that they are in pursuit. They've made a decision in their mind that they're going to be wealthy. They're going to have riches. Now, it says that they fall into certain things. Now, this Greek word for fall into is empipto. And this Greek word is also seen in a couple of other places, and we'll see that here now. In Matthew chapter 12 and verse 11, empipto is seen where a sheep falls into a pit on the Sabbath day. So, on the Sabbath day, a sheep is walking around and it falls into a pit. In Luke chapter 6, verse 39, it's where one blind person is leading another blind person and they fall into a pit. Therefore, this Greek word, empipto, has the idea of being surrounded by or consumed by what the person falls into, whether you fall into a pit or whatever you fall into. Empipto carries the idea that when you fall into something, you are now surrounded by this thing. It's like being swallowed up by this thing, whether it's a pit or you fall into a well or you fall into a valley, whatever. You are surrounded by it now. Now, there are three things that a person who strongly desires to be rich will be swallowed up by. So he says here in verse 9, but they that desire, they've purposed in their mind that they want to be rich. They fall into, they are swallowed up by three things. Now, what are these three things? The first one is temptation. The second one is a snare. And the third one is foolish and hurtful lusts. So these are the three things that Paul describes that people who desire to be rich, they will be swallowed up by these three things. Now we're going to look at each one of them individually. And we'll start now with temptation. So he says here, but they that will be rich fall into, number one, temptation. Now, the Greek word for temptation here is pyrasmos, and it means to try something, to test something, or to prove it. It would be like an inventor, and he builds this contraption, right? And it's all finished. And he's like, tomorrow I'm going to finally take it out and try it. So he wakes up in the morning and he eats breakfast and he goes out, he takes this contraption, and today is the day. I'm going to test this thing to see if it works. Well, that's what pyrasmos means. It means to test something, to try it, to see if it works. All right? Now, in context, the testing and the proving is all designed to lead that willful rich person to do wrong or in the wrong direction. So you have to understand, it says, they that will be rich, they are surrounded by, they're swallowed up by temptation, a testing, a trying. But it's not God's testing. It's not a testing like God's dokimazo, where God tests us in order to prove us so that we can pass the test. No. This is pyrasmos. This is a testing that leads the willful rich person in the wrong direction. These are tests designed to lead them away from God into these other things. But it's for the purpose of leading them into the wrong direction. The person who desires to be rich is swallowed up into tests and trials, pulling them this way and that way by every way, but every way leads farther away from God. So the tests and the trials that this willful rich person falls into is pulling them here and pulling them there. But every time it's pulling them in the wrong direction and it's leading them away from God. With more money comes more options and more opportunities for sin. Gambling, sex, drugs. Before they were rich, they didn't have money to go to Las Vegas or Atlantic City. They didn't have money to go to the local gambling place. Oh, now they do. Oh, yes. You see, now more options are open. With riches, more options, more opportunities, right? And before when they didn't have much money, Oh, they didn't have money for drugs. Now they do. Oh, that's another option that's open to them. Pulling them in the wrong direction. Temptations, tests, trials. And with more money comes more options, more opportunities for sinful things. Now you may say, Pastor Mark, not everybody that's rich gets into drugs and sex and alcohol and all these things. No, that's true. I agree, absolutely. But the temptations and the tests that these other rich people who go through that are not tempted by gambling and drugs and things, they have a completely different set of tests and trials that they go through, that they're pulled away from God farther away to join this boating club or join this motorcycle club or to get involved in this business transaction thing or whatever. Gives this business opportunity. It's just with more money to come. Well, now I can start another business, a different business somewhere else. And it's just more pulling and more pulling and more tests away from God. The temptation to go deeper into this world swallows them up. And it is almost impossible for the rich person to resist. When a person has so much money and they're beginning to get wealthy and they're beginning to have riches, it's almost impossible for them to resist going into activities which draw them farther and farther away from God. So he says here, those people who desire to be rich fall into temptation. They may not actually attain these riches, but they have the desire for it. And maybe before they even actually attain these riches, they get involved in some sinful, I don't have the riches now, but how can I get them? And it leads them into sinful activities, into things that, illegal things, to gain those riches, right? Selling drugs or doing different things to gain those riches. So it's not just people who have the riches that get into sinful things. It can be the people who don't have those riches, but they want them, and they see these sinful ways. They see these illegal things as a way to gain the riches. The second one is a snare. The second thing that a person who willfully wants to be rich falls into is a snare. Now, the things of this world can be a trap for rich people. They are drawn in by the temptations and bright, shiny things, and then they are entangled in them. Like a bird or an animal is caught in a snare, it is only with much pain and suffering and maybe even loss that they can get free. It's like a bird or an animal that gets caught into a snare. If it wants to get loose, sometimes if it wants to get loose, it's going to have to lose its leg. It's going to have to lose its arm or whatever. Whatever's caught in that snare, they want to get free from that. It's going to cost them much pain and even suffering and maybe even loss of a body part to get out of that snare. Can a rich person break free from these worldly snares? Yes, they can. But it's going to be with much suffering, much heartache, and mental and emotional pain. Why? Because they've invested so much of their life into these worldly things that for them to be taken out of that snare is going to cause, whether it's emotional pain, maybe heartache. When a person attains a higher standard of living and indulges in luxuries and then and then things happen and it can't maintain it, they crash and go into depression and maybe even commit suicide. And this is the problem with people who attain riches. They attain the riches and then the riches begin to rule their life. I've heard it said, you've probably heard it said too, it takes, you first manage your money and then after a while your money rules you because you have so much of it, you're a slave to your money. And the problem is once you have that money and you enjoy the riches of this world and you enjoy the pleasures and luxuries, and then all of a sudden something happens in your life and you begin to lose that money, then it brings in tremendous heartache, and some people can't take it and they commit suicide. They tasted the good life and they were ensnared by that good life. And now something happens. You find it a lot with sports. People in basketball players, football players, they have the money, they have the limelight for 5, 6, 8 years, maybe 10 years, and they're out there and they have the money coming in, they're signing the contracts, and all of a sudden their time is over. Their father time has hit them and they can't play that sport anymore. And now there ain't no more contracts coming in for them. And it can be a tremendous thing for them to not having, the $3 million, $5 million, or $15 million check coming in this year. And then to lose that all, to lose it, it's a tremendous test. A lot of them can't take it. And sometimes this cruel world can play tricks on people. Understand this. This is very important, what I'm about to say. This cruel world can play tricks on people. It can snare them in its luxuries and in its dainties, then drop them hard, only to watch them waste away their lives in depression and self-pity, and maybe even gloat over their suicide. Remember, love not the world. Love not the world. The world hates you. And ultimately, the world wants to destroy you. You think, listen to me, you think the world is your friend. It's not. The world is, you would say, what about unsaved people? The world must love unsaved. The world, I'm telling you, this world system, Satan's kingdom, who's running this world system, hates everybody, and it hates even the unsaved people. The objective of Satan's kingdom is to destroy you. The world hates you. The world will pretend to be your friend. It will pretend, it will suck you into its pleasures and dainties and give you money. But it's all for the purpose of destroying you. You have to understand that. You have to understand that this world system is trying to destroy you. And it will set you up with riches and with money and with pleasures. And then it'll drop you. And when it drops you, you can't take it. And you maybe even commit suicide. And the world gloats over you committing suicide. And the best way to destroy you is by tantalizing you with the riches and luxuries and the distractions, and to distract you away from an eternal relationship with God. A love for riches will always lead to snares. Jesus said, love, John said in his first letter, 1 John, but God was saying it to us through John. Do not love the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lusts of the flesh, the lusts of the eyes, and the pride of life, it is not from the Father, but it is of the world. And the world, what? Passes away, and the lusts thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abides forever. Don't love this world. Why? Because the world doesn't love you. You may think it does. It doesn't love you. This world system hates you. And ultimately, its ultimate goal is to destroy you. And it may tantalize you with glorious things, with money, with pearls, with riches, with vacation. It may tantalize you with that, but the reason why they're tantalizing you is to distract you away from God, so that you don't want God in your life. And then you die. And as soon as you die, you wake up to the fact it was all a lie. This world system, it was all a lie. It was all distraction. It was all misleading. The riches that I had, the money I had, the houses I had, it was all a lie. The world lied to me, and now I'm burning in hell forever and ever and ever because I got sucked into the belief that this world liked me, that there were pleasures in this world, that the Bible was not true, that God was not real, that Jesus didn't. So what? Jesus died on the cross. What's that got to do with me? Right? And the world sucked us in to believing their lies. And as soon as an unsaved person dies, they immediately realize their whole life was a lie. They lived in a lie. They lived in a distraction. And then they go to hell awaiting judgment by God. So, listen, the riches of this world, it's a snare. It's all a facade. It's all a lie. Everything around us is all designed to distract people away from God, to lead them away from God, to lead them away from any kind of knowledge of salvation, deliverance from this world system. We'll get into the last one, the foolish and hurtful lust, next lesson. But until then, walk with the Lord. I know He walks with you.